Thank you for coming to this episode of DeFi Talks. And in this podcast, we talk about tech and the future of our financial world. I have with me a very special guest, Sam. You work with Superfluid on their developer team, right?
Developer experience, yeah.
So could you please introduce yourself real quick?
Absolutely. So, Sam Flamini, and what I do here at Superfluid is a mix of developer work and interfacing with our community, right? So it's kind of this opportunity for me to straddle the kind of like BD, sales, ecosystem building, community building side, and also get into the code, write code, build examples, and all that kind of stuff, right? So my job is to make sure that our ecosystem has a good time building on Superfluid and ideally help grow the ecosystem of applications on Superfluid.
I remember right now it could have been 6 to 9 months ago, I was working on a project called Ricochet Exchange, the decentralized exchange, and we were implementing the Superfluid SDK. And I was trying to figure out how to do it, and I came across your videos on YouTube, and that's how I got it done. I asked a lot of channels, and the developer, like the dev support chat and Discord is really nice, really active, and people are always answering my questions, even if I ask them multiple times. So I've had a very good experience overall as a developer with Superfluid, and I want to try and help introduce more people to the concept of real-time finance and streaming. It's a bit of a difficult topic, though, so I wanted to come to you because I think you're probably the expert here. What would you say streaming is?
Yeah, so it's a good question, right? We like to call ourselves this protocol for real-time finance. And if we back up and think about what that means and why it's important, I think it's good to set the stage with that, right? So I'll give you the slightly more long-winded explanation, and then I'll give you kind of a punchy way to explain it in a second. So the really interesting part about Superfluid is that it allows money to move at the speed of the internet, right? The internet allows us to use services 24 hours a day, right? Data moves in real time, right? You can stream videos, you can stream music. We're all familiar with this idea of streaming when it comes to data. But streaming money seems a bit foreign sometimes, right? And streaming money is so cool because it allows us to take this idea of moving money in the form of a recurring transfer and bring it into the age of the internet, right? So what streaming is it's this ability to take any recurring payment, and instead of making it a discrete series of lump sum payments that are paid out once a month, once a week, every 2 weeks, once a year, instead what you can do is send money second by second. So let me give you a concrete example. Let's say you're making $10,000 per month at a company, right, to do developer work. Normally the way that would work in the US is you get $5K on the first of every month and $5K on the 15th, or maybe $10K at the end of the month in one discrete amount.
Yeah.
With Superfluid, what we can do is take that entire amount, effectively divide it up amongst the number of seconds in the month, and every single second, your balance will tick up, right? If we're 3 days into the month, you will have 3 days worth of your salary. You don't have to wait until the end to get that, right? You can extrapolate that out to subscriptions. You can extrapolate that out to even like microtransactions for internet services. Maybe I want to pay for an API service on a second-by-second basis to have some server running in the cloud for me. All these areas around recurring payments are where Superfluid provides huge efficiencies. And if we think about the analogies, the salary one's probably the best one. But yeah, the pithy short way I would explain it is it's this idea of taking this concept of recurring payments and moving it from discrete to continuous, right? Value can flow in real time.
So I think part of why people haven't really learned to use this technology is because throughout history, people have not had the ability to do a second-by-second payment. It's just not physically possible. It's inefficient. But with the advent of technology and the internet and near light speed communication, we are able to do so much more. I was at a meetup yesterday, and one person described streaming saying, if you start a job that instead of getting paid like 3 weeks later, because usually they take away a week, for behavior, and then you got to wait 2 other weeks to get your next paycheck. So people struggle when starting new jobs, especially when they're in their teens or early 20s. So if instead of having to wait 3 weeks, I could go to work and 3 hours later have enough to pay for my food for lunch, wouldn't that be a revolutionary thing where we could just give that value to people instantaneously. And we could see where that would go with investing. So people make money investing, and it's a good thing in their life. I'm not saying no financial advice here, by the way, but it's a strategy to make a lot of money. And if you can get your money in quicker, then you can also invest it quicker and make more returns. So I really like to see where this is going. I just find it right now very hard to communicate these ideas to people, and I'm hoping that soon we'll have more ways to do that. And I think that leads into the next question. What is Superfluid doing right now to introduce streaming to regular users who are not very tech-minded, just consumers, I suppose?
Yeah, so with any new technology, you do have to find your initial group of users that are willing to take risks and experiment with things first. So we are still broadly focused on some of these more crypto-native use cases for now, but the big one that we're trying to bring to more non-technical people is this. I guess there's really two, but the one I want to focus on is around salaries or contributor payments within DAOs or crypto-native companies, right? This idea of the salary use case is one that's very, I think, easily understood, and it is a big value add to people, right? I think, and to touch on what you just talked through, right? This concept that you can work 6 hours and have enough money for food immediately instead of having to wait 2 weeks. This is a really big deal and something that I've seen personally, like with my own eyes. So the first job I had out of university was this logistics job where I helped somebody that I'm close with start a logistics business. It was an Amazon logistics business, so all those Amazon Prime trucks you see, that was mostly the business, right? What we had were 70, 80, 90 hourly drivers, right, of all backgrounds, right? And what would happen is people that work for us would, they'd work, they made decent money as a driver because we paid decently well relative to other things they could do. And they'd work for us. And 2 days before payday, some drivers we had working for us would just skip work. And we couldn't figure out why they were skipping work. We're like guys, I understand payday's 2 days away, but you could have made money on those 2 days you skipped. Why did you skip? And the reason why they skipped is because they wanted to go. They didn't have enough money to quite bridge the gap for their expenses. So what they needed to do is go work for another local company that would pay them like $40 in cash for an entire day's work, which is like a third of what they would have made working for us, just to cover their bills, right? If we had something like Superfluid at that company, we could have avoided that altogether, right? All of those people that had the cash flow issues, which is, it's a lot of people that do have cash flow issues like that, they wouldn't have had to go take out things like payday loans. Like, we could have just enabled that in a much more easy way. We were on some restrictions with Amazon with how we had to pay them, right? Because we were so tightly knit with Amazon, we had to use this 2-week cycle. But again, I just wanted to highlight a personal experience and why that's so important and where I think this is going to go. So right now, we're very focused on salaries, right? We're also focused on subscriptions. We can talk about subscriptions later. But I think that this concept around salaries is going to be very, very important, not only for the salaried folks like you and I that might work like white-collar jobs, we get paid on salary, but also people that are getting paid hourly. I think this is going to expand into more areas where there is a lot of demand for like early access to wages.
There is, yeah. I also have a personal experience with this because before I started like going full-time into development, I had a part-time job. I was doing Uber Eats delivery. And one of the highlights of that job was being able to do a delivery and then cash out my money immediately. But the system that falls under is very restrictive. The numbers on like your Uber app, they're not really your money, and at any point that money can either be taken away or paused because it's not in your custody, it's in Uber's custody, and they're just allowing the payout, like sending you the money out. So while it is an amazing technology, I think Superfluid like goes above and beyond by decentralizing that and allowing anyone to interact with the contracts as long as they know what they're doing. I think we need more of that because you're right. People don't have a lot of money. A lot of people don't have savings. People like, especially now, jumping jobs a lot. Mm-hmm. So they lose a lot of value because there's always that 1 week period or that 2 week period where you don't get paid, that you have to work, and they just hold that money until the end, and you have to give them like a fair notice, and sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes it's not fair for. I hope I'm making my point well. I see the value in this, and I think yesterday I saw one of the applications built on Superfluid was the music streaming.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the way
you came to our community event.
Yes, I was
nice,
there.
Nice.
Yeah, I was there. That was the first time.
Nice.
Actually, one of the coolest things I've seen you guys introduce is the kind of like the 2D gaming thing.
It's like Pokemon. It's like Pokemon, the old Pokemon Game Boy games.
Yes,
That's what it looks
yes,
like.
exactly.
Gather.
Yeah. It's like a ROM hack. One of those like ROM hacks. People would play Pokemon, design their own characters.
Yep.
It was super. It made me feel like a child again on a certain level when I was picking the clothes. Like I cared about what the thing was wearing and what I called it. And it was a very nice moment, and I feel like it brought a fresh experience to this work from home thing.
Yep.
A lot more people have been working from home recently. You guys, pretty much decentralized network of people that all work from home. How are you successful with it? How do you keep it fresh, and how do you keep connected?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's an ongoing battle. We have the advantage in that we have this model where we have a centralized company that works on and services this protocol, right? The protocol itself is decentralized completely permissionless, but we have this ability to coordinate. We have lots of people on the team that have context, right? We're about 20 people, I think now, 18 to 20 people in that range, and we've made the remote thing work. I mean, we're in all kinds of different time zones. We have a fair number of meetings. We do a daily stand-up. And one other thing we do is we try to come to a lot of these events. I know we talked earlier off camera about this importance of going to meetups, right?
Yes.
This concept of getting in person and getting around people, even if you are doing most of your work remotely. It's really important. It's important for internal teams, and it's important for just your ability to feel connected to the world beyond what you're just doing in this remote life.
That's very true. I have a very strong connection to people that are running this event, the DeFi Philly event, like Mike and Jake and a lot of these people. But as soon as I traveled, just the human mind, like you get distracted and you get into your own world and you just kind of easily disconnect with people when there's not that presence. But when I am in the presence of people, I do feel better about myself. I have a better quality of life. And it makes me think on a better level as well because I'm getting challenged on my ideas. I'm getting constantly taught new things. So I recently the crypto community, or I guess the Web3 community, has been focusing on DAOs. People are building DAO tools. People are now doing this collective work, and it's a pretty hard world to navigate because we don't have a lot of prior, history or experience with this. Is there any advice you could give to community leaders or people that are maybe dealing with both developers and business people as to how to make this all work?
Yeah, so I interface a lot with our community. That's where we first interacted, right? It was in our Discord, right? It is not easy to manage a broad community in a really good way, especially when you're dealing with people that are from all different time zones. You have somebody asking you a question and it's 2 p.m. for them, but it's 1 a.m. for you, right? There's a lot of moving pieces here. One thing that I think is pretty important is being proactive if you're a community manager, and not necessarily proactive in trying to create artificial discussion, but proactive in individual one-off connections with people, right? A lot of community managers and people that interface with communities, I think they try to sit in this position where they're only going to do this high leverage work, where they're only going to talk to the community at large, they're only going to run events, they're not going to have these individual one-on-one conversations. But really what your community is this aggregation of all of these one-on-one relationships, right? And you as a community leader need to take ownership over what someone's experience is like when they come into your community. In my case, I do this on the developer side, but we have people on our team like Victoria, who's great, Yao, who's great, Fran and Mike, who you've probably interacted with as well, are also amazing with this. We all take ownership over having these one-on-one conversations. If anybody comes into our Discord and has a question, we feel very guilty the longer that question goes unanswered, right? It's like a thing. We can all feel it, right? We know that we have to take ownership over that. And we're also not afraid to have one-on-one conversations, right? You and I are talking one-on-one. It's great to be able to do that. And I think if you're willing to put in the unscalable work of responding to every question and having one-on-one conversations and really making an effort to connect with the people in your community, you're able to grow something much faster because people care about you and they feel like you care about them. And once you get to know people, you can make cool introductions. They're more likely to show up and be lively at your events. And I think all of that's important, right? The things, it's like the Paul Graham thing of doing things that don't scale. Community building is a place where that applies more than maybe anywhere else, honestly.
I see what you're saying. Each person that joins a community brings in a whole world of information with them, and they can really alter the course of the entire community in terms of even making it better, sometimes even making it worse, because each individual node is like just as important as the group. Taking that time to communicate with people, well, sometimes it can be really hard because there's language barriers, there's cultural barriers, and there's time barriers, so there's much more to work through. But I think at the end of the day, if you do that work, then people are much more respectful and much more willing to work with you in the future. And that really extends out, because if I need somebody that knows a programming language that I don't know, I know where to look. And that value added, even if you don't have money with you, even if you don't have time to invest or time to build, there's a lot of ways you can add value into communities. And now is the time to show that and to follow with that through to the end, because as soon as you join a community, then you can have a job, then you can have friends, then you can have wealth and projects. You can't do much by yourself. So we talked a bit about Superfluid, and we talked a little bit about communities and developer management. I kind of want to focus a bit on you and get to know you. When did you come into Superfluid?
Yeah, so I got involved basically because I was interested in this concept of crypto payroll. That is something I was really thinking through early last year, so early 2021. I was going deep down this rabbit hole of what would it look like, and I had all these things in my mind, like the conversation we had a little bit ago around people that worked at companies that I was managing and they were struggling with cash flow issues. I saw crypto as a way to build on top of better financial payment rails. And I was just interested in this whole idea. I'm from a sales background, actually, and from I ran this logistics company, right? So sales, ops. I did some product work. I've done small engineering tasks in the past, but I really dove in and taught myself to code, learn React, learn Solidity, learn just this entire Web3 stack, all because I was really curious about this crypto payroll use case, right? I wanted to build something there. I used that as what was effectively, I didn't realize it at the time, that was the way that I learned to program and learn to code, right? And what was interesting about that is it was very motivating. I was able to continue focusing on this project because I wanted to build this. I started to have customer discovery calls with people, and was really going down through the idea maze, the proverbial idea maze that Balaji Srinivasan talks about, with this idea. And I eventually came to this realization that, okay, true crypto payroll is less of a tech problem, and it's more of a legal problem. Right? It's more of a fighting these regulatory battles if you're going to do it within the United States. And I just decided, I looked myself in the mirror and I was like, do I want to spend the next 5-10 years of my life fighting legal battles? Is that how I want to personally allocate my time? And I knew what it was like, because that logistics business wasn't very fun for me on a day-to-day basis. I knew what it was like to be trapped in a business, in a leadership role that you just don't want to be a part of. And it's soul-crushing. So I decided to not go down that rabbit hole of the legal nuances of crypto payroll. And throughout my whole tinkering process, I was building on top of Superfluid, right? So my application was going to use Superfluid as a way to process payment. And I got involved with the Superfluid community. I started just answering questions in there because I knew about Superfluid, because I'd gone through the code base. At that time, there were docs, there were some tutorials, but there weren't as many as there are now, for sure. And I got in touch with Fran, who's one of the main founders of the project, and he kind of told me, hey, look, you've made tutorials, you've provided value to our community, you can program, you can kind of talk to people. Why don't you just come do all this here, right? You can be a part of the team, and you can continue to learn and provide value in the space. And I jumped on it. So that's kind of how that story happened. But again, it was it was a situation where I quit the job that I was at. I was doing like SaaS sales, and it was going very well actually. But I just left and took a leap to go get into this industry, and it's worked out.
There's this question that I usually ask people, but they get pretty upset when I ask them because I feel like the world of crypto, there's a lot of risk and a lot of like fog, and you really need to know where you're going. As an individual, maybe who uses these products as well as makes these products, what are some like pieces of advice or like pieces of wisdom that you've gathered over the years about interacting with these systems that maybe you could give out to other people that would help them in their own journey, like despite where they are on the ladder, like early or late?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. Let me think about how I want to answer this. So depending on who you are, you can get involved in different ways. If you're a developer, it's going to be apparent that there's a million different projects that want you to build on top of their stack. You're going to see a bunch of developer-focused content, and there's a bunch of educational resources that I help create and the people in the community help create as well to help you get started. So, developers kind of know what to do. But the average person, what you need to understand about these systems is that you can't really take anyone's word for anything, right? You have to try to do your best to learn a little bit about the technical side and understand what's going on under the hood of these systems, because this is all very early, and you have to be willing to take risks to learn how these things work. I do think that if you spend the time to learn how to use DeFi, understand how blockchains work, it's going to pay dividends for you in the long term, because these are 100-year, 1,000-year innovations here. This is not something that's just going to like blip up. You see it in the news today. Oh my God, there's a Bitcoin ATM, and it's going to go away. This is here to stay for a long time, and it might not be super apparent yet, but it's going to be here for a long time, and it's worth your while to understand how the systems that might underpin your society in the future work. So that's how I would think about it. I will say a big thing to note is that you have to be careful. What's unfortunate about the frontier is that while it attracts the most forward-thinking people in the world, it also attracts criminals in some cases and people that don't necessarily have the best intentions. And you have to, like, if you put yourself back in like the 1800s Wild West of America, if you were there, you'd know that you're in a land of innovators, and you're also in a land of potentially shady things. And you have to keep in mind that you're entering into a similar frontier where you'll see the best and worst of innovation.
I really clicked with that, comparing it to the Wild Wild West, because we kind of are in the Wild Wild West right now. There's no apparent regulation on most things. And people that are really good with programming are able to just make these projects and kind of make things that 100 years ago were only possible with billions of dollars, a bunch of people like on your team, like political power. So giving the world over to just these people that can learn these things and make these things, I think is very concerning, and at the same time it's also very exciting because we have so many new tools. We've solved so many problems that the world's been plagued with for hundreds of years, like the currency thing. If you send somebody Bitcoin or USDC, it doesn't even matter as long as everybody knows what's happening. You send them the money, it's from the United States to Africa in an instant, from the United States to Europe in an instant, at the speed of light. That was not possible. I remember just 5-10 years ago when people would send me money through Western Union, they would take a 15 to 30% cut. And it's just not fair because they know where that money is going to.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to just ask one last question. I'm really cognizant of your time. Thank you so much for being here again.
Sure.
So did you learn how to code by yourself? And if so, how did you get through that process? Like, I know a lot of people right now are trying to go through that process as well.
Yeah, short answer is yes, I didn't know how to do it by myself, but I think that was a mistake. That was a function of stubbornness more than it was a function of the right thing to do. We touched on this a bit ago. Meetups are important. Human interaction is important. I was stubborn in that I thought I could go do this thing and not have to go to a boot camp or things. I'm just going to do this on my own, and I was right. I proved myself right. But would it have been more fun had I gone to a boot camp or gone to meetups? Yes, it would have been way more fun.
More connections too.
Way more connections, and it would get you out of this zone of you just spending 12 hours a day at your computer all day.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you have to be willing to do if you want to learn this stuff at a really high level. But it would have been nice to break it up. So that is a bit of a regret of mine. However, it did work. So if you are learning to code and you do want to take a route where you want to be motivated and do a lot of this stuff on your own, you have to think about programming as just a tool, right? You don't just randomly go learn how to use tools for no reason because it sounds cool, right? That's not why you use tools. You use tools because the tools can help you do a job, right? And I get the argument of trying to really master a skill, and that's admirable. And I come from an athletic background where like I practice things over and over and over again, and I know what that feels like. I know that it can feel good to make that kind of progress. But you should pick a project. You should pick an area of interest where the tool you'll need to use to make the thing happen is obvious. If you want to build smart contracts and you want to do it on Ethereum, great. You should learn Solidity. If you want to build front ends and you want to build like dApps that interact with smart contracts, great. Go learn React. Go learn JavaScript and TypeScript, obviously, which you'll need to pretty much learn anyway, but really go deep into that. And then learn the basic Solidity stack and how the graph works and that kind of stuff, right? So the point I'm trying to make is the language you should learn and the types of things you should learn are completely dependent on what it is that you want to do. And if you can't really think through what you'd like to build or what kind of things you'd like to work on, but you still feel like you should learn Solidity and learn how to code, I would question yourself as to why you want to learn what you want to learn, right? Are you trying to learn these things because you're collecting infinity stones and that you can use to build something cool, potentially in the future, or do you specifically have an interest that you want to explore further? It's not necessarily bad to pick up programming languages and learn them because you love programming, but I think you're going to get the most ROI and you'll have the most motivation if you pick a general project, just like I picked the crypto payroll thing.
So I personally also learned how to code by myself, and when I started on Ruby. It was Ruby on Rails. I was doing like logic puzzles and data structures and algorithms, and I did spend like 10 hours a day by myself on my computer. Sometimes I would get so upset I would just like bump my head on the I just don't get what's going on, right? And at some point I had to make the choice because even though I really liked Ruby, it wasn't an efficient language for work in 2018, 2019. So I had to learn JavaScript, and that was a 3 to 6 month period. I probably could have invested in in JavaScript and been more far in my career right now. But I think it taught me how to think differently. It exposed me to a whole new world of like how to break things apart in your head when you're building things, in object-oriented design versus functional programming versus all these things. They at the start of your programming career, they don't seem important, but the deeper you go in, the more you realize like those small differences can really change what you could build with these tools, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I heard earlier in the audience somebody was talking about like Rust and why learn Solidity when you can learn Rust. Do you have the time for this?
Well, I have all the time you need. But yeah, so Rust would be useful if you want to build on Solana or if you want to build infrastructure. We have this guy on our team that just like loves Rust. Josh, you know Josh?
Yes.
Josh is a machine. Josh, if you listen to this, you're a machine. You know it. He's learning Rust because he wants to build bots. He wants to build infrastructure. And I think he has some curiosity about Solana, but I think he's the kind of person that loves learning new programming languages and figuring out what he can do with them. So I guess to answer your simple question is, if you like the EVM and you want to build smart contracts that interact with like the largest DeFi landscape, you should probably learn Solidity. But this is all going to come down to this is just a tool.
Yeah.
And you know what I admire about your journey there, though, and this is actually like a macro lesson that's been important for me, is that like you weren't afraid to look at the Ruby learning as just a sunk cost and move on, right? Yeah. You weren't afraid to just say, okay, you know what, I've climbed this hill, right? It wasn't the hill I want to be on. I got to go back down and climb a new one. And a lot of the only real like kind of regrets I have, I don't really have many regrets like career wise. I'm also still pretty young, so like it's, you know, I guess we'll see how it plays out. But every like mistake I guess I've kind of made has been sticking with something for maybe longer than I necessarily should have in certain situations when I knew it wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do. And the reason why that's hard is that there is this sunk cost fallacy we all have, where just because we've learned something, we've spent so much time into it, it makes us want to continue investing time into it, even if it's not the right thing. So if you're trying to get into this space and you have a career, you've done lots of different things, know that all that knowledge will be useful in some capacity, probably, but you have to be willing to look at this stuff with the beginner's mind and start over.
If you want to get anywhere in tech, you always have to accept that you will always be a beginner, because it's constantly evolving, and it's evolving faster than we can keep up with it. That's why we have all these specialized roles and languages. So each thing that you learn is something you should cherish. I hope people can take that as a lesson from all these podcasts. Just try to learn stuff. You have the internet. Everything is free. There's no investment other than just wanting to sit down and learn instead of watch something. And I did a lot of watching and playing games before I committed myself to learning more and more, and it's only ever been positive for my life and career. Sam, thank you so much. I really appreciate you again being here. Is there anything you want to leave off with?
Yeah, I would say I'm on Twitter at sflamini5 if you want to engage with me there. And you should check out Superfluid, right? I mean, it's something we're all working very hard on every day. If you're interested in this concept of recurring payments, or if you want to build a really interesting Web3 application or a DeFi application, come check out our docs. Superfluid.finance is our URL. If you go there, you learn more about us, and if you join our Discord, you'll interact with me directly. Just like I said, I'll answer your questions, I promise.
The Superfluid Discord is absolutely huge. They have a channel for everything you can think of, from just hanging out to developer support to job listings to bounties. So I really, really take your time to get to know them. One of the best companies I've ever interacted with, and I really believe in the future of Superfluid and in the future people building on top of Superfluid as well. All right, guys, thank you. That has been episode 10 of DeFi Talks, and we'll see you in the next one.